Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to the channel. And today we're going to go ahead and take a look at some of the better JRPGs available on the PlayStation 4 as well as the PlayStation 5. Yeah, per usual, you just kind of love that backwards compatibility component for these next generation consoles. But yeah, every once in a while, I just want to play a really good JRPG. They do oftentimes have a very different atmosphere compared to your Western style of games, and they offer some unique gameplay on top of that. And the thing about PlayStation consoles is that they do have a lot of really good JRPGs, several of which are actually exclusive. So today we're going to take a look at the top 15 best JRPGs available on the PlayStation 4 as well as the PlayStation 5. Keep in mind, though, that this list is only my opinion, and if yours is different, then let me know some of your favorites in the comments below. With that said, let's just go ahead and jump right into it. And to start this list off, I have the drop-dead gorgeous Odin Sphere developed by Vanillaware. Now, Vanillaware does have a tendency of making these really good games that goes a little bit under the radar, and Odin Sphere kind of fits into that category. This is a game that I feel like a lot of people have missed out on, and they really shouldn't, because this is an excellent JRPG. Obviously, the first thing that you're going to notice about Odin Sphere is its beautiful visuals, but really it plays just as good as it looks. And thanks to its expansive ability trees, you can also build the character that you want. This is a legitimate RPG with a lot of options at your disposal, and if you do like your more action-based JRPGs, then Odin Sphere is definitely a game worth checking out. Now, here I have the Legend of Heroes Trails of Cold Steel series, which is a very good modern style of turn-based JRPG. We don't really see a lot of these bigger turn-based JRPGs, but this is actually one of the best modern takes on the genre. It does a very good job at what it does, and it also has a really interesting story and well-made characters. You do play as a student in a military academy, and you can actually form bonds and create relationships with the different students across the academy as well. This is something that we have been seeing a little bit more in recent JRPGs, and if you do like that type of stuff, then you're really going to like Trails of Cold Steel. Now, I will say that if you do intend on playing through the series, I do recommend starting off with the first game, because this is an ongoing series. It's quite an undertaking, but well worth it. And next up, I have the wacky but very charming Disgaea 4. Now, the first thing that you really need to know about Disgaea is that this is an extremely wacky game, and it doesn't really ever take its story or characters too serious. You play as a bunch of demons that may think of themselves as nothing but evil, but the more you play the game, you find out that they're not so bad after all. It's really a fun and charming story from beginning to end that I really did highly enjoy. But even though it does have a wacky story, it also has really in-depth strategy RPG gameplay. You will have to use a plethora of different tactics to navigate the board and outsmart your opponent. And the thing about this game is that there is an absurd amount of upgradability. You have this just insane level cap of like 9,999, so your characters can get extremely powerful, and then on top of that, you can also upgrade the different gear and weapons to absurd amounts as well. So really, you can put about as much time into Disgaea 4 as you truly want. Now, with that said, even though Disgaea 4 is my absolute favorite in the franchise, I would actually recommend all the other Disgaea games that are available as well. They're all pretty much going to follow that same formula, and it really just depends on which one you prefer. Ni no Kuni is a special JRPG. I think right away you just kind of fall in love with the characters of this game, because the intro itself is just so emotional and heartfelt. You really just connect with the characters right out of the gate when it comes to this game, and it just sets up a grand journey right out of the gate. It's emotional, it's heartfelt, and it brings out this childlike wonder in you as you explore a parallel world to your own. And then it's just all brought together with its beautiful Studio Ghibli art style. This game really does look phenomenal, and thanks to its art style, it's going to be one of those timeless classics that just ages incredibly well. Beyond its story, world, and art style, though, I would also give high marks to the gameplay. It does play out kind of like a Pokemon game where you catch different monsters, you create your own party, and you evolve them, but here you actually can move around in battle and even control your tamer, quote-unquote tamer, or in this case a wizard, and then you can just kind of go all out. It's an interesting style of gameplay that really works well. Now, the Tales of series is a long-running JRPG franchise, and really, I would say it's actually one of the better JRPG franchises available as a whole. For the most part, these games have been pretty solid over the years for their action-based combat, their characters, and their charming and lovable stories. But if I had to just pick one single Tales of game, I'd have to go with Tales of Vesperia, because I absolutely adore the characters in this game. Really, I would say that in video games as a whole, Tales of Vesperia actually has some of my favorite characters. Just the chemistry that the characters have together in this game and the relationships that they form throughout the game, it just really stands out to me, and I think it really makes Tales of Vesperia pop. Now, it also has fun gameplay as you can travel across the world, and it has this action-based combat where you use different arts and you can use some hack-and-slash type of combat, and it is a fun game, but it really is the story that I think that stands out the most. Now, I will go ahead and say that there's plenty of other great Tales of games, including Tales of Berseria, so make sure to go check those ones out as well. And here I have Scarlet Nexus, which is a really interesting anime-style, action-based RPG. This is a very action-driven game with its telekinetic powers that you can use from afar, and then mixing it in with that close quarters combat. It feels absolutely excellent, and I would say its combat is so good that I would actually compare it to something like, let's say, Devil May Cry or Bayonetta, which really excels with their combat. That's what you're going to get out of Scarlet Nexus. But it also goes beyond that because I think it's got an interesting story. It's got good characters. You actually do have two entirely separate stories that you can play depending on the character that you choose at the beginning of the game. It's got a social aspect to it. The world is fascinating with its cybernetic-esque future, and I just think that this game as a whole is a very good JRPG. And here I have the Kingdom Hearts franchise, which I always kind of explain as a magical experience. I really do believe that everybody should try these games at least once to see if you like it for yourself. And yes, even though the stories are absolutely convoluted and they don't always make sense, Kingdom Hearts is never short of entertaining. Somehow, Square Enix characters with Disney characters really works out well. I personally really like the completely original characters that Square Enix made in these games. But yeah, you're going to see Final Fantasy characters. You're going to see characters from The World Ends With You, and you're going to see lots of characters from Disney-related universes. You do travel to several different Disney-related universes, whether that be Pirates of the Caribbean, you have The Little Mermaid, you have The Lion King, and it's always interesting to see all of these characters meshed into one singular universe. But it really is that main storyline here that I think is just so endearing, and that is something that I do want to point out. If you do decide to play through the Kingdom Hearts games, I do recommend playing through the entire franchise, Kingdom Hearts 1, 2, 3, and all of the games in between, because they're all important to the story. As convoluted as they may be, it's still very entertaining, and I think it's well worth it. Monster Hunter has absolutely blown up in recent years with Monster Hunter World, and well, for good reason. This is an excellent game that offers a rich ecosystem with unique monsters, and that's something that always really stood out to me when it comes to this game. It feels like a real lived-in, breathed-in world. Not only do these fantastically designed monsters interact with you, but they also interact with different monsters around the world and just the overall environment. They feel like real breathing creatures, and that really adds to the atmosphere and just the overall gameplay. And when it comes to the gameplay, it offers an addictive but fun gameplay loop. You're going to hunt down these monsters to gain resources to upgrade your weapons, your armor, and it's just there's a ton of customization in this game. Each weapon also has their own unique moveset, and this game just becomes incredibly addicting if you really start to get into it. Don't be shocked if you end up playing hundreds of hours of Monster Hunter World. There's been a lot of games over the years that's tried to imitate the Dark Souls formula, but none better than Nioh. Now, you can get the Nioh collection natively on the PlayStation 5 or Nioh 1 and 2 on the PlayStation 4. Regardless, these are very challenging games, and even though they might share some similarities with the Dark Souls franchise, they really do stand tall completely on their own. They actually do feel unique with that Team Ninja flavor. It has an over-the-top story and a fluid, deep, challenging combat system. The combat really does pop when it comes to the Nioh franchise. And if you like a challenging experience, then Nioh is among the very best. Now, for the most part, the Yakuza games are a bit of a borderline RPG with some light RPG elements thrown into them. Most of the franchise I would consider to be more of a beat-em-up style game, though with Yakuza 7 Like a Dragon, this is where they really changed up the gameplay and made this into a legitimate turn-based JRPG. It's quite a bit different than past Yakuza games, but it actually works incredibly well. It's your typical turn-based JRPG in more of a modern Japan setting, and that's kind of unique, but that's really what Yakuza does extremely well. The atmosphere in these Yakuza games are just unparalleled, with just nailing down that Japanese atmosphere. And then on top of that, I mean, you're really not going to find games that have much better stories than the Yakuza franchise. Yakuza 7 is really no different. It has great characters. It's got a ton of different twists and turns, and you're always right on the edge of your seat to see what happens next. I really do consider the Yakuza games to be among the very best story-driven games, not just of recent times, but really of all time. I really think that the stories are that well made, and if that's something that you like, then the Yakuza games, Like a Dragon, 0 through 6, as well as the Judgment franchise, those are must-play games. But that is one of the cool things about Yakuza Like a Dragon. You don't actually have to play any of the previous games. These do have a completely new set of characters, and you can just jump in and enjoy it right away, again, with that turn-based JRPG style of combat. If you grew up during the 90s, there's a good chance that you might miss playing a lot of these old Square games with this turn-based setting. Just these massive worlds with just intricately told stories and just fantastic turn-based gameplay. Unfortunately, we just don't get many games like that anymore, with Square Enix kind of moving more into that action-oriented style of gameplay. But Dragon Quest is that one franchise that's really stuck to its roots. Dragon Quest XI is this big-budget, turn-based JRPG where you set out on a grand adventure, you meet a colorful and memorable cast of characters, and just from beginning to end, this is your classic JRPG that really you grew up loving back in the 90s. It's just more of a modern style of that experience, and it's not only refreshing to see a game like this still be made, but games like this still play incredibly well. I don't think that it's just nostalgia or anything like that. I just think that these turn-based games with these grand adventures, I think that they're timeless. And I think Dragon Quest XI shows exactly that. I think this is going to be a timeless classic with its story, its characters, its gameplay, and it's just beautiful art style. And here I have Persona 5, and some fans out there will consider this to be the absolute best JRPG of all time. And really there's multiple reasons for that. One, the turn-based combat in this game is absolutely phenomenal. It really does have some of the best turn-based combat in the entire game industry, with a plethora of personas to fight with. You're always trying to exploit your enemy's weaknesses, whether that be with elemental attacks or a sidearm, as it will knock them out, and then you can kind of do a group effort to finish the turn. It allows for a lot of extra damage, and it makes these turn-based battles a lot more fast-paced and fun. One of the more memorable components to the Persona franchise, though, are their characters and stories. And really, Persona 5 does both of these very well. It's got a well-told story with some twists and turns along the way. The characters are so lovable and charming, and it also has that social aspect to it, to where you can actually bond and form relationships with the many characters throughout the world. It also stands out with that stylized art style, but if there is one complaint to this game, it is that it does have some pacing issues. This is a 100+ hour long game, and it can be slow at times, making it feel a bit like a slog. But if you can stick with it, this absolutely is one of the best JRPGs. Nier Automata is a game that really took me by surprise last generation by just how good this game truly is. And now we also have the Nier Replicant Remaster, which just followed that experience up so perfectly. Not only are these games fun with their hack and slash style of combat, but the stories in them and the world are just so beautiful. Now, these games do have kind of a strange vibe to them, and you can really feel that in the world. There's something that almost feels off with them, but it just absorbs you into its atmosphere. A part of that is its characters and stories, which just kind of sinks their teeth into you. I think with both of these games, they're just so beautifully written, especially the further you get into them, and that is something to kind of keep in mind when you play a Nier game when you reach the end credits, that's not actually the end of the game. You're going to have to beat these games multiple times, which I do think that Nier Automata does handle a little bit better. Nier Replicant becomes a little bit more repetitive, but yeah, both stories are just masterfully told. And then you have the music, which I would consider to be some of the best music in gaming of all time. I actually still listen to the music of these games on occasion to this day, but yeah, I would actually consider both Nier games to be masterpieces. Just the memorable characters, the mesmerizing world, the beautifully written music, and everything about these games, from the gameplay to the combat, it feels so perfect. The Soulsborne games have become some of the most influential games in the entire game industry. They've almost kind of created their own genre with their unique style of combat, that challenging difficulty, the risk-reward system and currency. And really, even though there's a lot of games that kind of imitates the Soulsborne games, none does it better than, well, From Software themselves. And you actually have 3 different franchises here. You have Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and then Demon Souls, but with each having their own little unique twist. Now, it is important to keep in mind that Demon Souls is a PlayStation 5 exclusive, but really, PlayStation is the best place to play these Souls-like games. And even though these games do have quite a bit of a different playstyle than some of the other games on this list, these, on the surface, are excellent RPGs. Now, with that said, if you haven't played any of these games before, you might be wondering which one to start off with. And really, I can't choose a favorite because they're all so great in their own way. You have Demon Souls and Dark Souls, which plays very similar to one another, with Dark Souls having more of an open-ended world, and then you have Demon Souls, which you go monument to monument, or level to level, in other words. And then you have Bloodborne, which is the more fast-paced out of the 3. It really just depends on which one you prefer out of the 3, but all 3 are amazing overall games. And at the number 1 spot, I have the godfather of all JRPGs, being Final Fantasy. Now, Final Fantasy is just such a special franchise for just so many reasons. This is one of the most influential and impactful JRPG franchises ever made, and really, you can just play so many of the Final Fantasy games and just truly fall in love with their worlds, their characters, the music, and just everything. There's not very many franchises that can captivate an audience the way Final Fantasy can. Whether that be with 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you have 11, 14, 15, 13. I mean, all these games have captivated an audience in a completely new way. They may change the characters, combat, and worlds, but one thing is pretty consistent with this franchise, and that is that it is consistently amazing. Now, everybody kind of has their own favorite Final Fantasy, and I'll leave that up to you and what your favorite game is, but I really would recommend pretty much all of the mainline Final Fantasy games that are available on PlayStation, and that even includes Final Fantasy XIV. That is an MMO, and it's going to be quite a time investment, but yeah, definitely well worth it. But I have to go ahead and shine some light on Final Fantasy VII Remake. For years, people have been wanting a remake of the timeless classic Final Fantasy VII, and well, we finally got that, and you can play Final Fantasy VII Remake on the PlayStation 4, or you can play it on PlayStation 5 with that new native version out now. This even includes the Yuffie expansion, and the characters were just so expanded in this version of the game. Even minor characters that were in the original game were so heavily expanded on that I just fell in love with these side characters as well. I think it really came to the point that Final Fantasy VII Remake has some of my favorite characters of any game of all time. Like, I think that they did a standout job with Final Fantasy VII Remake and its characters. And they also did a great job with its combat as well. It kind of mixes in that modern style of action-based combat with more of that classic formula where you can actually stop time and choose different elemental-based attacks. They did a really good job at combining the two together, and I think it feels perfect. Though if you do really want that turn-based classic style, they do have an option for that as well in Final Fantasy VII Remake. Regardless, do keep in mind that this is only part 1 of Final Fantasy VII, but it does roughly take about 33 hours to complete, which, I mean, that's roughly the same length as the original completed Final Fantasy VII, which is about 36 hours. That just kind of shows you how much they really expanded on the world of Final Fantasy VII Remake alongside its characters. It's heavily expanded on, and it feels like a standalone game all on its own. Like I said before though, really pretty much any of the mainline Final Fantasy games are really good, and I'd highly recommend checking them out. Anyways though, that's it for this video, but if I missed any game that you think deserves to be on this list, make sure to let me know in the comments below. With that said, if you liked the video, don't forget the bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.